friends and YouTube neighbors. Today is going to be a little bit different presentation, and I hope you'll bear with me. More of a slideshow. But this idea comes from a positive comment and helpful hint from one of my last posts about the negative changes to anchoring and mooring installations in fields around here. I thought what I'd do for this video is show where you still can anchor. As I've mentioned before, some of us consider anchoring to be an act of navigation, and so what I want to do here is just go through a few of the places in my home waters, Buzzards Bay and Vineyard Sound, where a sailor who is cruising or perhaps just passing through might actually still be allowed to pull in and drop their anchor for the night before moving on. So I'm going to talk about a few of those places that I have direct knowledge of. There will be others, and I hope that this will sort of spark conversation about places that I either don't know about or haven't mentioned. I'm also going to mention primarily island locations. That's because most of the coastline harbors in this neck of the woods are sort of bedroom communities, and what you're going to find is that if you do want to stop in Padenham or New Bedford or Mattapoisett or Marion, you can in fact anchor in those places out beyond the mooring field. So those places aren't mentioned, but bear in mind that that is always an option, of course, generally with far less protection than the inner harbor and subject to wind conditions. So here's a few of the spots that might come in handy and might offer some refuge for a sailor passing through this area. So it's a little publicized part of our history that when the Pilgrims in 1620 headed this way, they actually intended to land somewhere around New York. But given the vagaries of navigation at the time, they found themselves right off Pollock Rip, south of Cape Cod. Conditions between current and sand shoals and wind were such that rather than try and fight their way through Pollock Rip into Vineyard Sound and then down the coast to New York, they ended up doubling back to the north around Cape Cod and into Provincetown Harbor. And that is how we ended up with Plymouth Plantation. So pretty much after the time of the Pilgrims, even back into the colonial era, there were ideas about a Cape Cod canal, a shortcut across the Cape. There was in fact a natural waterway there that nearly cut the Cape into a separate land or island, but it was too small for any sizable navigation. So this idea of a canal as a shortcut to eliminate the hazardous shoals around Pollock Rip and, generally speaking, throughout Nantucket Sound, it's an old idea. And to this day, there are still a lot of boats that pass through Buzzards Bay or Vineyard Sound in making their passages either up or down the coast, east or west. So it occurred to me that it might be a handy thing to have sort of an update on where, if you were one of those boats, you might still be able to stop, drop the hook for the night and get some rest, or time the currents to move on the next day. So some of this is for cruisers who might want to visit these places just for variety of cruising ground, and some of it is for travelers who may need a place to stop and may not either have the resources or the wherewithal to essentially plan their stops every night and rent moorings in advance of arrival with their thumbs. Very often passage making is weather dependent, and you may not know today whether you're going to be in one of these places tomorrow or next week. So I'll start up here closest to the canal on the Buzzards Bay side and point out the beautiful little harbor and anchorage known as Onset, part of the town of Wareham. This is an extremely convenient spot for staging going through the canal either way. The Cape Cod Canal currents can run in excess of 4 knots. So if you are in any vessel, but particularly a moderately powered sailing vessel, there is just simply no wisdom to bucking that current. You need to time your passage through the canal, and onset is in a location that is actually partially into the canal, but allows you to make a stop overnight if necessary. It allows you to anchor and gives you a good staging point for passage through the canal. So on the plus side, onset is a 360-degree sheltered anchorage. You really do not have to worry about what direction the wind's going to come from when you're in there. On the minus side, you have to make a hard turn into the entrance channel to onset, and it's a bit of a long approach to get to the anchorage, but not too bad. What's bad about it is on both sides of your turn, there are rock piles. There's no room for error here. It's well marked, and the marks in general will be visible and stay above the current flow, but you will be making a hard turn out of very often a swift moving cross current to get up into this channel. So you've got to be pretty sure about your propulsion. You've got to be very well studied on the navigation, the marks as they're upcoming, because they'll come at you fast. And one other caution is that you will find lobster pots set all around these rocks, and the current is at times swift enough to pull the buoys completely underwater and turn them into essentially underwater mines. Fortunately, there's a couple of commercial vessels that come and go out of this channel on a daily basis, and well, let's just say they're pretty good mine sweeps with their 4-inch diameter shafts and 4-foot props. But you will find lobster pots either drift into the navigable channel there, or are set just too damn close to it. So use caution when you make that turn. Once you're through the turn and into the inner channel, it's all peaceful. Once you're up inside of onset, you can make your way up past Onset Island, and you'll find a really good area where essentially around 10 foot of water, 10 to 12 foot of water of good sticky mud waits for your anchor and holds it well. There isn't a lot in onset for the cruising sailor as far as any provisioning would require land transportation. It's pretty far away from the port. It's a cute little village, mostly sort of a summer vacation village with a few good restaurants and ice cream shops like that. But don't really come here planning to be able to do much to extend the larder while you're here. The next closest to the canal as the staging point, where your anchor is still allowed to grab hold of the bottom, at least for a little while, is Red Brook Harbor. Red Brook is a long navigation approach through a winding channel, but it shares with onset that it's a pretty good 360-degree protection once you're in there. And the anchorage in there is actually to the east of Bassett's Island. Is sort of a narrow strip of 10 to 12 foot water between the channel that leads up into Pocasset and the island itself. So according to the guidebooks, you need permission to stay here overnight. I've stopped there for one night at a time and never had any official question, but just so sort of be advised that you may be approached and asked your intentions if you anchor in there. The other caution about the Red Brook Bassett's Island anchorage is that it tends to be a magnet for weekend partiers. That beach can be, well, it gets pretty lively sometimes. I've seen generators and live bands with large speakers. Certainly a magnet for a lot of small boat traffic coming across from the bedroom harbors on the Falmouth side. So it's not the most peaceful spot on a weekend, but for all of that, it is still a spot where you can anchor and be relatively sure that you're protected from any wind shift. So next up, a place you've definitely heard me talk about if you followed my channel is Hadley's Harbor. Hadley's is a good example of why municipal takeover of a waterway is not always in our best interests. This is the main harbor of Noman Island, which is a family-owned farm trust of the Forbes family. Hadley's Harbor is completely unique around here in that the Forbes family maintains a whole bunch of moorings, all of which will be marked private and all of which are private. But they suffer us to borrow those moorings subject to their need, and they don't charge for it. So you're allowed to go into Hadley's and pick up a mooring marked private with a couple of caveats. One is that you have to leave immediately if they ask you to, because it's their mooring and they may have somebody that promised it to. The other is that you are not allowed to go ashore on the main island of Noman. That's considered private. But there is Bull Island at the entrance to the harbor, which is sort of dedicated as a public island for picnics and walks and that sort of thing. It's a beautiful little spot. Anyway, so Hadley's Harbor, the inner harbor will be filled with moorings, though there is space to anchor between them, subject to not interfering with the moorings. And it's completely landlocked, completely protected from all wind directions. One of the best sheltered harbors around. Besides the inner harbor where the moorings are, there is sort of a intermediate harbor on the way in as you're passing around Bull Island that is completely open, and that's an Anchorage area. Gets quite busy in the summer. Boats will be cheek by jowl in there, and not uncommon to have boats sort of bumping and banging and screaming at each other. But definitely a good all-weather, all-wind anchorage. About 15 to 17 feet of water in there with good mud holding. And then finally there's the outer harbor, which is outside of Bull Island. This is a fine anchorage in anything but a northeast wind, anything in the typical summer southwest, all the way around, even through a southeast wind. You're pretty well protected in the outer harbor. A little deeper there, probably 20-ish feet of water, but room for a great number of boats and adequate shelter, and absolutely no restriction on anchoring. Up at the west end of Buzzards Bay, I'm skipping over the north side of the Elizabeth Islands, Noman, Pasque, and Nasharina, because while there are some coves there and some nice beaches that are popular for day trippers, there's really nothing there that offers the sort of shelter you might want for a peaceful overnight slumber on your passage through. So we come up next to the other end of the island chain and Cuttyhunk Island. Cuttyhunk Island used to offer a 360-degree sheltered anchorage up in the northeast corner of the dredged basin. The caution here is be very careful on your chart to observe the dredge basin, because you'll go from 10 feet down to 3 feet with a mud wall. People very often will look off to the west side of the harbor and see all that open space and go charging right into that wall. Anyway, water under the bridge, but Cuttyhunk decided this year to delete the anchorage area of their harbor by spreading out their rental moorings. So while you may be able to shoehorn your way in there and be probably at least partially in the channel, and certainly anchored in a way that exposes you to being pushed into the shallows with a wind shift, my opinion is that Cuttyhunk Inner Harbor has been barred from anchoring, and if you're going to go inside and expect to get 360-degree shelter, you're going to be paying for mooring. But there is still, there are two areas outside where people anchor. The better of the two is off to the east end toward Canapitsit Channel, and That is firm sand slash mud, good holding on the plus side. On the minus side, the winds are wide open there from anything but a southerly component. So anything westerly through easterly is essentially going to roll right into that anchorage and make it untenable. The other anchorage people will try and use is over toward the entrance break wall. I don't recommend that because it's an extremely grassy area, and you will, if you watch carefully, you'll almost never see a boat haul back there without a veritable hay bale hanging from their anchor. So right now, if anchoring is your desire and Cuttyhunk is your destination, unfortunately, and if you draw more than 3 feet, it seems to me that the beach off Canapitsit Channel is about your only option. The biggest negative to that spot, besides the wind, is that you will be rocked by boats racing their way over to and through Canapitsit Channel to some good fishing grounds. So expect the loud powerboat engines to pass close and the wakes to rock you starting pretty early in the morning there. If you're on the Vineyard Sound side of the Elizabeth Islands, on the southern side of Noman is a beautiful little cove called Tarpaulin Cove that I've videoed in from in the past. This is an anchorage that used to be used quite a bit more in the days of sail only, going all the way back to the colonial days, the Revolution. There were the British used it as a base. There were some pretty famous cutout expeditions launched from the Cape against the British in Tarpaulin Cove, and known and apocryphally anyway for pirates and privateers as a hangout. What it is a great spot to drop your anchor if you've got to wait for the tide to turn in your favor. So these days, Tarpaulin is just a good peaceful spot where the only thing you can do is anchor. There are no rental moorings there. Again, part of the Noman Farm Trust owned by the Forbes family. There is no local government trying to capitalize on this cove, thankfully. So a good spot, but again, wind dependent. Tarpaulin is fairly open to any winds from the south around through the east, and frankly, even northeast can send a pretty good swell wrapping in there. So if you've got northerly component winds, even southwest isn't too bad. Generally, that's a pretty benign wind. So pretty nice spot. If you happen to be on that side, that's a worthy consideration for a cruise destination or an overnight stop. And then the last spot that I'll put on the list for this week, because this is already getting to be long-winded, is Vineyard Haven. Now, Vineyard Haven, formerly known as Holmes Hole, used to be a major shipping port for coastwise schooners in the days of sail. And until last year, it was a very good stop for cruisers. There's a grocery store in Vineyard Haven that's a stone's throw from the public dinghy dock, so it was one of the best places around if you needed to provision, albeit at slightly elevated island prices. Unfortunately, the new local constabulary saw that a number of people were using this corner anchorage up here in the southwest corner, just outside of the break wall. There's an entrance there that you could dinghy around and make the ride into town relatively short. This was a good stiff sand holding bottom, and while the chart will show depths of 4 to 7 feet, my experience is that the real water depths there were at least 2 feet more than the mean low water. So Charis's 6 feet of draft, never had a problem anchoring in that corner. Again, all of Vineyard Haven really is wind direction limited, and you simply do not want to be anchored anywhere in that open roadstead when the wind goes to anything with an east in it. It just becomes untenable. So as I mentioned, as of last fall, I saw that the outer anchorage had been debarred by a new line of dock or rental moorings extending all the way out to West Chop, and a buoy in the corner saying no anchoring. So essentially, the anchorage in that corner is no longer. The one area that's left that's been designated as allowed anchorage is on the southeast side of the harbor over by the causeway. So there is a relatively small area in there. Not sure about the holding. I suspect it's rocky sand because the beach is. But that area is still available. It's loud because of the cars going back and forth on the causeway. And you will get rocked pretty badly by the ferries since it's fairly close to the ferry channel. And most of the ferries do tend to come in throwing a pretty good wake. The other area worth mentioning is well out of the inner harbor toward West Chop, beyond the mooring field. Of course, it's beyond the mooring field because no one wants a half-hour dinghy ride from their mooring. But yeah, you can still anchor way, way out as long as you can deal with the dinghy ride into the dock. So that's Vineyard Haven. Now you might look at that and say, well, what about Lagoon Pond? If you wait for the drawbridge, you can go up inside. And true enough, there has been traditionally anchorage allowed in Lagoon Pond. However, what I've seen is that each year it has been whittled down to a smaller and smaller area. And recently published articles lead me to believe that the eelgrass advocates have or will soon have barred anchoring anywhere in Lagoon Pond. So I would not count on that as an option at this point. So in the famous words of Winston Churchill, forgive me for making this letter so long, but I didn't have time to make it shorter. Somewhat long-winded this week, but hopefully those might be sailing this way or passing through get some benefit from it. There used to be a great publication for the Intercoastal Waterway called Skipper Bob's Anchoring Guide. It was pretty much a photocopied, homemade, spiral-bound pamphlet that you could buy in most of the marinas along the way in the Intercoastal Waterway, showing you where to anchor. But I don't know if that publication is still around. Probably online if it is. It was a very helpful, similar thing. And I know that certain organizations like I think it's the Cruising Club of America, will publish the locations of members' moorings that other members are allowed to borrow. Active Captain used to be a fantastic group resource for this kind of information until Garmin bought them and became subscriber access only. So anyway, hopefully this is the start of a conversation, and what I'd really like to see this do is sort of turn into a discussion for where you know of or where you like to stop and anchor on your way up and down the coast or in your area, or let's share the knowledge and try and get one step ahead of the mooring proliferation. Thanks for stopping by. If you enjoyed the video or got something out of it, please subscribe or give it a like, and see you next week.